mental or emotional cognitive disabilities or limitations. We also see folks being sent to domestic violence shelters, which isn't necessarily a fit, again, because of the needs of an older adult population, or because of the perpetrator makes them not eligible for DV services. So, as I'm sure you're all well aware, the CDC defines elder abuse as an intentional act or failure to act by another person, and including physical, sexual, psychological harm, neglect, and financial exploitation. We know that the abusers are most frequently family members and often caregivers of some setting. So, as I said, we know that a lot of the shelter options have not been safe or successful for folks in situations, especially with APS or law enforcement involvement. So we luckily have been in touch with APS and have been working hard. What we did, there was a shelter in Indianapolis, 1985 to 1993, at the Marion County home that was run, I'm sure some of you know, Doug May. He oversaw that program. During those 8 years, they had about 100 admissions, but there hasn't been anything similar in Indiana since that time on a formal level. And I certainly understand that there are informal structures that are in place in terms of providing shelter, but in terms of a structured program. So Evan mentioned the Riverdale home in New York has a program called the Weinberg Center for Elder Justice. They've led a group of about 15 elder abuse shelters nationally through a group that they call the Spring Alliance, where they share resources and best practices. And we've been really lucky to partner with them to start this program. We were able to look at the resources that we have, both as Hooverwood Living as a skilled nursing facility and rehab, and also Crafts Commons, which is our assisted living, and seeing that we can provide care with staff that are trained for adults in this situation, and then we can help with a discharge that's a safe discharge to a least restrictive environment possible, so that we're able to make sure that people's autonomy is respected. They're able to be discharged into the safest program possible. We've really gotten this program going as a community program. We've been very, very lucky to design the program with the support of Marion County District 8 APS, the Marion County District Attorney's Office, and the Center for At-Risk Elders. And then we've put together a community advisory committee that has been instrumental in making this program run, both in terms of support, referrals, and the ability to provide services that we would not necessarily be able to provide in-house. So, that includes APS, the District Attorney, Indiana Legal Services, healthcare providers, including Eskenazi, IU Health, and Community Health, and social service providers across the Indianapolis community. We've gotten wonderful support internally from our medical directors, our staff, as well as support externally from Leading Age Indiana, HS, which is the National Association of Jewish Nursing Homes, and our hospital system. We partnered with Hancock Hospital, and we've had excellent support from all of those in getting this off the ground. Our mission is to provide safe, appropriate housing, care, and resources for older adults who experience elder abuse. And then as a vision statement, we said we envision a continuum of community resources that ensure older adults are safe, cared for, and respected. Our team of professionals are equipped to respond to older adults' unique strengths and vulnerabilities, and the voices of older adults continue to inform our work. As I mentioned, we've really structured our program to be a shelter-first model, knowing that we can partner with other resources throughout the community. We've got wonderful resources that are in the community that are experts in this field, but we're missing that piece of shelter that we were able to provide. Other models across the nation and in other communities look different. Some are more based in the community and finding short-term placements in hotels or other options. But we really saw, the strength that we have is having a safe place for people to stay, and then being able to partner and outreach with other community partners. The program is not entirely self-funded, but is, some shelter participants are actually able to be funded for their stays through Medicare, Medicaid, or insurance, especially those that have already been in a hospital. So if they're on a hospital discharge, that's one way. If they're nursing home eligible, those services can also be reimbursed. But we've also received a number of grants. So we are a subgrantee and part of an ACL grant for the Elder Justice Innovation Grant through the Weinberg Center at Riverdale. And that is a 2-year ACL Elder Justice Innovation Grant that is focused on showing the efficacy of the shelter model and being able to show that individuals who use a shelter program are less likely to be associated with APS afterwards, and can report that they are feeling safer in a safe environment after a discharge from a shelter program. So that grant is just getting started. We're in the data gathering phase of that grant. We've also received generous funding from the Sephardic Foundation on Aging, the Jewish Federation of Greater Indianapolis, and individual donors. We've also become a vendor through FSSA for APS emergency placements. So again, this issue around if somebody needs to be removed from an unsafe housing situation or an unsafe situation, rather than sending them to an ER, which we know would not necessarily be the best either for them or for the hospital, that they can have a safe place to stay. Our model is, there's admission based on referral. So we've partnered with other social service agencies, and I'll go through our referral sources. And as soon as somebody comes in, there's an assessment of any medical needs or other social service needs that they need, developing their advocacy plan and their discharge plan. And really that discharge plan starts from day one. What is going to be the goal for a safe, effective discharge with the most independence possible for an individual. For individuals who are coming in through APS, those individuals may be experiencing incapacity. So if that's a permanent incapacity, we'll address that as part of the plan. If it's somebody who is not experiencing capacity, right, they might not necessarily need a high level of memory care or a high level of care. They really might just need a safe place to go to get back on their feet before they can find a safe place to move and get set up. And so we want to be part of that process and help that happen. Our referral sources are from APS, the local hospitals, the Centers of Hope, and the medical centers, senior centers, the district attorney's office, legal services agencies, home health care, law enforcement, EMS, basically any professionals that are interacting with any older adults. We want to know and see how we can help. The criteria we've set up to be able to operate this program is that we have availability and capacity. We want to make sure that there's no time in which we're trying to help somebody who's in a traumatic situation and we're at full capacity and don't have the staff or the space to take the proper care plans. That somebody has referred to us that they're 60 or over. That's a pretty loose age line. Certainly we've had referrals for folks who are slightly younger, but our expertise as an organization has been with older adults, and so we've really focused on helping older adults. And that they have experienced or at substantial risk of physical, sexual, psychological, financial abuse or neglect by an intimate partner, family member, caregiver, or other trusted individual. So we've really focused in this first year of our program on working with folks who have either have been abused or at risk of abuse with another person involved. We've put sort of working on self-neglect as sort of a next step, knowing that that's a different level of care and it's different requirements in terms of clinical needs. The individual, agrees to come and stay at Hooverwood Living for a temporary period. As I said before, we work closely with APS, so we do work with folks who are experiencing capacity, as well as folks who are not experiencing incapacity, right, and who are able to make that decision to come and stay with us. As we've gotten started, we've set up, some limitations as a way to really get our program up and running. As I mentioned, self-neglect. Hoarding is a similar issue, also because we are a skilled nursing facility. A risk of any type of infestation would really put staff and other residents at risk. So if there's a hoarding situation, that is a different issue. Active substance abuse is not something that we are currently really prepared clinically to work with, and so that's a limitation that we've put in place. And any situation where there would be a safety risk to residents or staff. If there's a potential security risk regarding an accused abuser, that hasn't been the case to date as an issue, but we're keeping that in mind as a security concern. So since our opening, we've admitted 4 participants, 3 men, 1 woman, 3 women, 1 men, and 3 of whom were white or Caucasian, 1 of whom was African American. All 4 have been referrals that have been APS involved, where there's been some level of incapacity, at least on a temporary basis. Although not all those referrals were directly from APS, some of those referrals were from hospitals. And we have received about 25 referrals since June, averaging about 2 or 3 a month. Our limiting factors in terms of admission since opening have been related to COVID mostly, and outbreak, around the time of Delta and Omicron, that we've had to be very careful in terms of admissions, both for the protection of other residents and the potential participants. So that's been one challenge that certainly we know industry-wide is certainly. We've also been looking at the number of folks who have been referred to us with needs around memory care. And so that's sometimes also something else that we're making sure that we have the capacity to provide. The other piece that I want to highlight is that, I think there's a myth around social service programs sometimes that, only the most vulnerable, the most economically insecure, the most medically frail are at risk. And that's not been the case in terms of even just these 4 participants. About half of those have independent financial resources. And so, I think there's this range where elder abuse really does affect, anyone on the aging spectrum and in the health spectrum. So I've just spoken for quite a long time, and I wanted to open that up for some questions and be able to talk about the program or anything else that I can answer.
I had a question. I don't know if you can hear me or not, though. Yeah, okay, I fixed my mute. Joanne, I am here. Sorry, I wasn't able to answer earlier. Han, I just had a question. Do you take individuals just in the Indianapolis area, or is there a kind of a circumference around Indy that you look at, or where do you take individuals from?
So we have focused so far on the Indianapolis area. We have referrals in Hamilton County, Hancock County, and Boone County. I would say we've focused on that so far because so many of our community partners are local, working with SACOA, our local area agency on aging here. And that's been a real benefit because we know that once somebody's discharged, that we're going to be able to be in touch and make a warm handoff to those social service providers in the area. I'm certainly open to working with folks further abroad, but I think one of the pieces that we've been thinking about it, and certainly part of our conversation with Deb Lambert and part of why she invited us to speak today, is that I really see that this is a model that can be replicated across the state. And that there's really no reason why there should just be a program in Indianapolis. What can we do to be able to make sure that anywhere across the state, we can make sure that there's a resource for somebody to be able to have a safe place to go?
Hi, Han, this is Kelly Tungate. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can, Kelly.
Yeah, just such a wonderful program. I'm incredibly impressed by the work that's been done, and many thanks to you and everybody involved. My question is, you mentioned serving not just, but 4 individuals since January 2021. Is that a funding limitation? Is that just a capacity? What more would you need to be able to serve more families at the present time?
It's a great question. So the folks that we have not admitted, the pieces that have been, like I say, those limiting factors have really been space around memory care has been one. And then COVID was really the other biggest. The third limiting factor is folks that wouldn't necessarily have met the criteria, where there's a potentially dangerous situation, but it's largely related to a lack of affordable housing. And I know I'm not going to be surprising anybody in this group around knowing that there's a lack of affordable housing for seniors, and that sometimes there's an issue where somebody's facing eviction, and there isn't. We've had a couple of referrals that have been folks who've been facing eviction, but there isn't necessarily a situation of a personal level of abuse. And that's not to say that eviction can't be a traumatic event, but as a way we've started to set up the program, that's been a limiting factor. So, I would say in terms of things that would really make the difference for being able to provide more, the largest is knowing that there'd be other providers around the state that would be amenable to admitting these participants other than us, right? That, if we could know that, there's going to be 4 other locations that somebody could have a safe place to go, that would be a huge, a win, I think. Deb, I think you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just kind of want to piggyback on what you're saying, and thank you and Evan both for being on the call today. I appreciate that. There's over 500 nursing homes in the state of Indiana, and what I would love to see happen as a result of this conversation is that whether it's built around the AAAs in the community, but to really put together a system. So, some of their exclusionary criteria would not be exclusionary criteria for us because we tend to serve a different population. So we tend to serve younger adults. We tend to serve adults that have intellectual developmental disabilities. We tend to serve adults who have some mental illness issues, although they cannot be in an acute, episode of delusional schizophrenia. I mean, that has to be stable in order for us to take them, but we do take those folks. So I see, really not only hopefully being able to expand this program that they have throughout the state for the betterment of adults who are compromised, but also, to identify those key communities, like you said, if he had 4 or 5 other nursing homes that said, yes, we want to come alongside Hooverwood and do this program, not just in Indianapolis, but throughout the state, so that we could roll out this type of a program. Because the worst time to figure out an emergency is in the middle of the emergency. So if we could maybe kind of come up with a plan and then roll that plan out to all the adult protective services throughout the state, and have crisis intervention teams through the police department be aware of these programs, I just think this would be a huge win-win for the state of Indiana.
I'm going to jump in. This is Joanne, and just put an ask out there. First of all, thank you so much for your presentation. This most vulnerable population, in all my years of working, what I've seen is there's not a formal infrastructure. Oops, we got an echo going. A formal infrastructure at local levels to take care of these situations. And so often there's Band-Aids used, and it's very difficult and very stressful to try to get these people that need these services under care. So what I'm wondering, Deb, thank you so much for bringing awareness to this to the commission. The commission is by statute to look at issues related to older adults in Indiana that need attention. We can develop advisory committees for the commission. And Deb, I am just going to put an ask out. I'm thinking we need an advisory committee to the commission, and would ask if you might be willing to take some leadership here and bring some people together on the advisory committee to come back to the commission, and we can go from there with work, but to bring awareness.
I would absolutely love to do that. Thank you for the opportunity.
And we certainly would hope that our presenters today might be willing to be on that advisory committee. I'm kind of putting people right out there on the spot today, and for other people on the commission or others on the meeting today. Deb, could they get in touch with you by email? If they're
Absolutely.
interested in serving on this advisory committee? And Deb might be making some invitations to people too, to be on that. But this is really an important issue and needs attention. And we're so grateful that all of you are bringing attention to it and that you are serving the Indianapolis area with this needed service. So Deb, would you have anything else you might wish to say about this advisory?
No, yeah, anybody that would like to be a part of this, please feel free to email me. I believe my email address is on the invite for the Zoom call. Yeah, I'll chat with maybe Evan and Han and see if we can snooker them into helping out as well, and get moving on this. So absolutely, anybody that cares to join is more than welcome to join.
And for commission members, we need representation across the state for this. So if you know facilities or people in your area, please get in touch with them and get connected with Deb so that we can try to get this pushed out across the state and get input across the state. I know this is a problem up north. And I'm sure it's a problem in the south and the east and the west of the state. So let's see what we can do. But this is just really important. And thank you so very much for bringing awareness to this to the state level here. And let's see what we can do in the commission.
Thank you.
Any other comments from anyone?
Thank you. Thank you again for allowing us to talk about this critical need. And we're excited to be able to talk further about this in the upcoming weeks and months ahead.
You're welcome. We really appreciate it. Okay. Well, moving along, we have an update from the Division of Aging. You may be on mute. I don't know who's giving the update.
Yep. Hi, Joanne. This is Darcy Tower. I was on mute. You think I'd have it figured out by now, right? Going to. All right. Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you. My name is Darcy Tower, and I work with the Division of Aging. I oversee the aged and disabled waiver and traumatic brain injury waiver, and the providers, and most recently, the care managers who render those services. And today, I just wanted to share a little bit of information about the division's process in developing 2 new waiver services for the aged and disabled waiver. Each of the new services we developed were based on conversations that we had with providers and consumers and caregivers. And we also reviewed our incident reporting trends to determine gaps where new services could be most supportive to people. And so the first service I'd like to talk about is called Caregiver Coaching and Behavior Management. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the division's learning that took place about caregivers. It occurred really during COVID and then after, and why we believe, supporting caregivers is necessary work. And we'd like to look at the current services the division offers through our waiver to support caregivers, whether directly or indirectly. And then we'll take a little bit of a deeper dive into the new service and how it's different from what we currently have. So next slide. So during the first part of Indiana's public health emergency, the division developed sort of a high-risk response plan to identify folks, whether waiver or non-waiver, who would be at an elevated risk if they lost services, right? They didn't have a backup plan. And to the division's knowledge, they didn't have an identified caregiver. And so our care managers worked really hard every week to check in with these folks about any unmet needs. And during these calls, we learned that many of these participants did have informal supports that had just gone unidentified. And in talking with these folks who really were doing caregiving work, we learned that they needed support and didn't have it. Many of the participants we talked to weren't part of any of the direct caregiver services on our waiver. Could be for a variety of reasons, right? They could be, maybe they had other services, or maybe they didn't qualify like the eligibility criteria for one of those caregiving services. And so at that point, we really, we decided that we needed to determine a way to figure out who is doing caregiving. How do we identify that? And, what are the strengths and areas of needed support for these folks identified? And what resources are available to support caregivers who need something other than what is currently offered on the aged and disabled waiver. And so part of that work the division did, and really want to put a spotlight on Elizabeth Payton with our division, who developed a caregiver assessment for caregivers to administer. And through that assessment work, talking with providers who work with caregivers, talking with care managers who work with caregivers, and then reviewing our incident report trends, we learned that one of the areas, which I don't think you'll be surprised about where caregivers have stress, is certainly financial, right? Having to choose between employment, or do I, work full-time as a caregiver? And then the other area where we saw stress in caregiving is for consumers who have a dementia diagnosis. Maybe they have some strong sundowning symptoms, or consumers who had an identified serious mental illness, or maybe a combination of both. And we learned from caregivers that they don't feel equipped to meet the needs of these individuals. And that often leads to caregiver burnout. And then that leads to placement of an individual in a nursing facility. Next slide. So we've been able to tackle some of the gaps we learned about related to caregivers. So we now have our caregiver assessment. We also have the financial component addressed by allowing caregivers to be hired by a personal services agency or a home health agency for reimbursement. And we also have a program called Structured Family Caregiving, which I think we've talked about in the commission some, and that provides a stipend to caregivers in addition to training and education. But if a caregiver would like reimbursement, but really doesn't want the oversight or really the training and education, we do have a self-directed program where the caregiver can be paid through a fiscal intermediary. But the piece that we really worked on this year through the new waiver service is, the issue of participants who are not part of one of the services I just talked about, but who have an identified caregiver who does need support. And we also really wanted to put more of a spotlight on, caregivers who need interventions to support participants who have dementia or have a serious mental illness. Next slide. So the division's new service is called Caregiver Coaching and Behavior Management. And as I mentioned, it supports, participants who don't receive structured family care or self-directed care, but who have a caregiver who needs support. And the difference between, what is offered in structured family care versus this new service is that, structured family care really focuses in on the participant's needs and how we help the caregiver wrap services around that participant. And this new service is really more focused on the caregiver and their needs and what do they need to be able to support the participant at home. Next slide. So I'd like to take a little bit of a deeper dive into this service, and the best way that I sort of know how to tell you about, how does this service look in real time is to tell you a story. And I did get approval to use these pictures, so not breaking any HIPAA rules. But I wanted to tell you about Pam and Lucille. Pam is Lucille's daughter and her full-time caregiver. Lucille now lives with Pam because of some increased dementia, but Pam wanted to keep Lucille at home as long as possible, like so many of us, do. So Pam works full-time. She's a teacher, and she's a mother, and she's a grandmother. She has a great group of friends. They're always traveling together, doing lots of social activities. And Pam was able to have a nurse staff hours for Lucille during her workday. When she comes home, right, she's assuming that full-time care for Lucille. And Lucille's sundowning is starting to create situations where she is not sleeping during sleep hours. And so that means neither is Pam, right? Pam's getting like 2 hours of sleep every night. And she's also, Pam has stopped socializing, right, with her friends because she's exhausted. And she's worried that when she has other providers in the home that she may need to be there to help them with Lucille. And so she's got some depression and she's really experiencing burnout. And so Pam shared these concerns with her caregiver coach, right, through the new service. The coach performed an assessment to learn about Pam's strengths and her areas of need. And then the caregiver coach also learned about Lucille's day-to-day activities, right, and needs through a different assessment. And so what they realized when it came to the sleep issues, right, we learned that Lucille is not active during the day, right? She's watching a lot of Judge Judy. And so when it's time to sleep, she's just not tired. And so the caregiver coach was able to work with Lucille's paid supports, her nurse, to increase her activities during the day. She now goes to adult day a couple of times a week. And so she's engaging both her mind and her body. And by increasing the cognitive and the physical activity, she's tired at the end of the day. And so that's improved her sleep habits, which in turn, right, has allowed Pam to get some sleep. The caregiver coach also worked with a local elder volunteer program. So a friend visits Lucille on the days that she's not going to adult day. And Pam is being more intentional, right, working with that coach to be more intentional about scheduling her activities ahead of time. Right, she's able to hire a respite provider to care for Lucille and schedule that ahead of time. And then she's able to use equipment, right, like FaceTime, if she needs to check in on Lucille, if she's having a little anxiety about, how she's doing. That technology has decreased her anxiety. And so we have the caregiver coach create a service plan, right, for both Pam and Lucille. And the coach is consistently addressing the needs and modifying based on both the changing needs, right, of the caregiver and the participant. Because we know so much, right, of the caregiver's ability to do their own life is really dependent upon, what's going on with the waiver participant. And so their lives intertwine, right, in such a way that the coach needs to have an understanding of both individuals. Next slide. So I think the most important takeaways from the new service are that it really does open up another option, another choice for waiver participants who have a caregiver but do not receive waiver services through structured family care or self-direction. I think there's also more of an emphasis around the dementia and mental health piece in helping the caregiver have the tools to support behaviors from the diagnoses. Next slide. So our second service, and I'll go through both services, and I'll take questions at the end, comments. But I would like to talk about the second service. It is called goal engagement. And about 1 year ago, the division attended a lunch and learn with Johns Hopkins to learn about a program they implement called Capable. And of course, it's an acronym, and it stands for Community Aging in Place, Advancing Better Living. It's identified as an evidence-based program. It's person-directed, and it addresses both functional ability and then healthcare costs related to functional impairments. It's a program that lasts about, between 4 to 5 months, and it integrates a team of an occupational therapist, a nurse, and a handy worker. And this team works together alongside with the participant, right, to set goals and develop action plans. And the purpose of those action plans are to change behaviors, to improve health and independence. And during the program, the participant will be learning new skills. They'll be practicing these skills, working with new types of equipment and modifications to improve their function, which then improves their quality of life. And so we worked with Johns Hopkins. We also worked with Massachusetts Division of Aging, who recently implemented Capable into their waiver. And so they were able to help us with some lessons learned. And so the Indiana Division of Aging did keep sort of the roots of the Capable program, but we call it goal engagement. Next slide. So I'll go ahead. I'd like to talk a little bit about sort of the benefit of implementing small environmental changes for waiver participants, and sort of, how those have a big impact, as we've seen through Capable program data. I'd like to look at the current services we offer for home adaptations on the waiver, and then how this service will differ from those. Next slide. So I love this picture because it's a great example of how small environmental changes make a big impact for a person really thriving at home. This participant is a retired school teacher, music teacher. She loves to play the piano, but her arthritis caused her too much pain. And so she was able to obtain supportive arthritis gloves and a back brace to improve her function to play the piano, and that then in turn really increased her joy of being at home. And so what the division has really observed in learning more about these small environmental changes is the impact is really of the environmental change is less sort of about managing the chronic condition and more about promoting and improving functional capacity. And I'm sure, many of right, like the individuals on our waiver, their independence and health is usually compromised, right, by chronic illnesses like stroke, heart disease, diabetes, arthritis. And so the inability of these folks to successfully manage everyday functions like bathing and dressing and preparing food and taking medications, it increases their likelihood of admission to a nursing facility. But it really also threatens their independence. It can strain, family and care partners, and really increase healthcare costs. And so the premise of Capable is really rooted in resilience theory. And it tells us that people really at any age, right, are resilient, and they're surrounded by many overlapping resilient systems. And when small environmental changes are implemented that work to engage a person's mind and body and spirit, we do see a decrease in disability and an improvement in physical function and self-care skills. And we find that individuals do reach their goals to remain at home. Next slide. And so the waiver today currently addresses home adaptations in 3 different ways, right? We have home modification, which supports an independent assessor, right? Reviewing the home, creating a specification for the work that needs to be done, and then a contractor comes in to perform the specification. And we also support individuals through equipment to manage their medical conditions. But often what we see with these services is that they exist in silos. We think about home adaptations, right, in terms of the physical structure of the home and what needs to be done, as opposed to how this person is navigating within their home. These services also don't combine that integrated team. Next slide. So in order to start a shift in breaking down the functional barriers among providers and to really think more about how people navigate within their homes and their community, and how we can use equipment to empower independence, we implemented goal engagement. And as I mentioned before, it's a 4 to 5 month program with a $3,000 budget per person per year, and that pays for an OT, it pays for a nurse, a handyman, and equipment that can also be purchased through Medicaid as well, but any equipment that wouldn't be purchased through Medicaid, we can purchase through this service. The team will be trained through Johns Hopkins to do skills like motivational interviewing, active listening, and coaching. And the goal is to understand how a successful life is defined by the participant. So the participant is the one deciding on their functional goals, right? Like taking a bath, taking a walk, going to church, right? As opposed to more medical-based goals, like, reducing blood sugar or their blood pressure level. So the goal of goal engagement is that, a change in a person's physical environment will stimulate a change in an individual's motivation. Next slide. And so I want to walk you through the program components of goal engagement and the roles each team member plays during the 4 to 5 month implementation. So the participant, right, is of course the center or the driver of the team. And so they will do a self-assessment. They will set their own goals and determine their own priorities, this program. They'll also be a part of that brainstorming team who are thinking through options and solutions about how to achieve these goals. They will be consistently working, right, making progress, doing exercises, learning more about the new equipment in order to, practice the new skill and become expert at it. There's the occupational therapist, which makes up to 6 visits during those months. They'll conduct a functional and mobility assessment. They'll identify home risks and needed modifications and equipment. They do a fall prevention and equipment guidance, and they develop alongside with the rest of the team an action plan that will help the participant meet goals. The registered nurse makes up to 4 visits. So that person will be taking a health history, reviewing current, health providers, identifying any key health issues, reviewing, pain issues, medication, and is also a partner in that action planning process. And then the handy worker joins the team in the first month, right? They receive a work order for the home modification and household items, and they're consistently conferring with the participant and the occupational therapist about that equipment. The handy worker will obtain the supplies, and they'll install the improvements, which we've seen sort of take on an average 1 day in the person's home. And usually what we've seen is that the average cost of the home improvements and supplies is about $1,300 per participant. Next slide. So I want to walk you through sort of what this looks like in real time. And I wanted to tell you the story of Mrs. R. So she's a 76-year-old retired music teacher, lives on her own, in her own home, and has always been really active until recently. She has arthritis, a tremor in her hand, and she has lung disease. And so she's having a tough time, right, doing her daily activities like bathing, dressing, preparing food. She's also not socializing much. And when she tries to do activities, she finds herself really exhausted, often losing her breath, and she's in a lot of pain. And so she shared these challenges with her OT and her nurse, and they worked together with the handyman to help her develop goals. And the group came up with solutions then to help her meet those goals. So her first goal was to prepare food without shortness of breath. And so the handy worker lowered the cabinets so she could reach the items she needed with less energy. The handy worker also installed an above stove mirror so that she could see the food she's preparing while she's seated. And she also has a reacher that helps her have better control to pick up items. Her second goal was to be in less pain when she plays the piano. And so the handy worker had added an extended chain to the light, and then he switched the bulb to LED so she could better see the music. She also has the arthritis compression gloves and a back brace to decrease her pain. And then another step they took was to build her a higher bench for her back pain. And then her final goal, right, was to bathe using less effort. And so the handy worker smoothed out the bathroom entry threshold, so that she could easily push her rolling walker into the bathroom. And then the shower doors and the frame were removed, and a secure shower curtain rod was installed so that she could better get into and out of the shower with ease. She also received a new tub bench as part of this program that allowed her more movement within the shower in a safer way. Next slide. Oh, sorry, I think those were goals. Yep. And so those are the 2 waiver services we are adding. They haven't been approved yet by CMS, but we are in the process. I know some of you provided really thoughtful and helpful comments through the public comment sharing, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Hi, Darcy. It's Deb Lambert.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you. And I may have missed this, but is there like a limit on the number of people that each of those 2 programs will serve, or no?
No limit on the
Wonderful.
number of people.
Nice. They sound like great programs. I can't wait till they get approved.
We're really excited. It's always a process to try to add services, right? So we're really excited to be able to have the opportunity to provide more support.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for your answer, and thanks for your work.
Yeah.
Darcy, I don't have a question, just a comment. This is Tarek.
Hi.
Thank you
Hi, Tarek.
so much for sharing this information. This is wonderful to hear, and we are very excited with this work. In fact, I had a meeting this morning with Dave Withy and his team at NeighborLink, and the topic of capable came up.
Yes.
And so it's wonderful to know that it's not going away, that you guys have actually made some very strategic moves to have this particular thing added under goal engagement. So kudos to you and the team. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we are so excited about it.
Hi, Darcy. It's Jennifer.
Hey.
We are too. I think these are going to be excellent services. What is the approximate time frame that you think these will be ready to actually launch and get started?
It's always hard, and it's always hard to say because we never know how long CMS is going to take to review the service. But we are getting ready to send it through. I think if approved by CMS, it will likely be October.
I want to be sure to give everyone an opportunity to comment. This is a very exciting program. I would guess this is linked to the Division on Aging addressing issues related to, in the plan, to strengthen family caregiving support, and this other very interprofessional program to address quality of life for older people. Very exciting. It's about as much excitement as I've seen in a response that a DA program has gotten in a while. So there we go. Happy St. Patty's Day. Other comments? Well, thank you very much. Thank you so much, Darcy. We look forward to seeing these programs enacted.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you for letting me share them. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Any other comments from the Division of Aging before we move on? No. Erin's saying no, move on. Okay. Well, I made a little change in the agenda because we've had a very busy legislative session. Kristen, you want to come up and probably just join me here at the table. I think with the camera back there, and we're trying to figure out how to do this hybrid program. But Kristen, you I'm sure are going to update us on some of the issues that have come forward out of this legislative session. And also, I'm going to ask you if you comment a bit on the area agencies on aging are part of the Older Americans Act, connected in with the state units on aging and the administration on aging. And as Indiana moves forward with plans for managed long-term services and supports, perhaps in your report, if you could address some of the issues that how AAAs might see themselves more in a kind of an ideal way participating in managed long-term services and supports.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Hello, everybody. It's this is a really weird setup.
It's very strange.
And I am just so disappointed that like 3 people came downtown. Next time we need more downtowners. And I also want to give a shout out to Erin and Joanne, who are wearing their green today. I think there's a St. Patty's Day parade downtown that made it a little difficult to find good metered space. So I had to search for that. And I think Rebecca is going to help me, I understand, and share the screen with the information packet. Wonderful. Okay. And we're going to try to work through some parts of this information packet. I learned that Willie is out of the office today. And so we shared the packet with Christy, and she's going to try to get it to y'all. But just know that there's nothing different than what you'll see on screen versus what you see in your packet. And so I want to start out by just recognizing that this is Nutrition Awareness Month, and it is actually the 50th anniversary of the Older Americans Act nutrition programs. And the area agencies on aging and Christy Garner work to get a proclamation from the governor every year regarding Nutrition Awareness Week. The AAAs prepare special events. They all serve a special menu. They have special placemats. And so I wanted to highlight the work of all the nutrition directors in bringing awareness to the importance of senior nutrition during this month. Okay, so we can move down a page. And in your packet, I know you're not really going to be able to see this, but it's more of a placeholder, and you can look at it in your packets when you get them in your email. But we just finished up the General Assembly, and so we have included actually a shortened version of the report that our lobbyist prepares for us related to outcomes of the General Assembly. And there was a lot that area agencies on aging weighed in on. We take a very broad view and try to weigh in on social determinants of health, things that are very specifically aging related and aging services, as well as healthcare in general. So you'll see you'll see what looks like a weird combination of stuff that we weighed in on. I wanted to highlight a few good outcomes. First of all, there was a small increase to the senior property tax credit. What's happening now, given the skyrocketing value of homes everywhere, is that even though their incomes haven't increased, housing values may throw seniors out of eligibility for a tax credit, a property tax credit that they now or formerly were able to receive. And while the original legislation requested, I think, a doubling of the increase, it got bumped up by about, I think, $30,000, $40,000. So it's progress. It's not all of what's needed. That was something we weighed in on, and we appreciate that that went through. We also supported the creation of a tax credit for contributions to the ABLE account, 529A savings accounts. If you'll recall, when these were established, we first supported that and have weighed in on supportive legislation every time it's been proposed. Unlike the 529 accounts, the regular accounts, these ABLE accounts did not have a state tax credit associated with them. So I think the legislation mirrored the 529 tax credit, and it will start, I believe, in 2024. So that was a compromise. They wanted it to be effective this year, but they bumped it out into the regular budget cycle. So the legislation's there, but we'll see how that goes. Another thing we weighed in on, which was really introduced and supported by the Alzheimer's Association, was a requirement that in-home care workers be as part of their regular training regimen, that training had to include training on Alzheimer's and dementia annually. And it does not increase the total number of training hours that healthcare, that in-home care worker must receive, but it is training that should be included in that regimen annually. So we think that was a really good thing as well. One of the big issues that we worked through in the General Assembly related to legislation sponsored by the nursing facilities related to managed long-term services and supports. And I think we talked a little bit about this at our January meeting. And the legislation originally proposed or would have required FSSA to promulgate some alternative models. And it also included a lot of provider protections that the nursing facilities were particularly interested in on behalf of their membership. Our position, or the AAA position throughout the General Assembly, was to ensure that the legislation did not impact or negatively impact some of the roles that the AAAs hope to perform in MLTSS. There were organizations weighing in on both sides. The nursing facilities certainly supported the legislation. FSSA opposed it. There were other organizations that opposed it as it came down to the last minutes in the session. The bill ultimately died in the House Ways and Means Committee. There was a tiny bit of wording that was inserted into a conference committee report that requires or prohibits, I should say, FSSA from entering into managed care contracts until January 31st of 2023. But from everything I can tell, this won't materially affect FSSA's ability to move forward with managed care. So really no, all the work that everybody put into it, there was really no impactful outcome of the legislation. And so I think I'm going to stop there. In your packet, you'll be able to see many other pieces. Oh, I will add, you're going to see in your packet a bunch of legislation that has to do with interjurisdictional compacts. psychology, I think, just things related to medical licensing, et cetera. There's also a bill that expands the ability of our state to educate more nurses. So things that were related to the healthcare workforce, particularly in expansion of that workforce or creating more ease for people to move into the state or provide services across state lines, we have supported. Particularly interested in rural areas that have less access to services in general, as well as our border counties that access some of the major health markets across state lines. But there's a lot of other stuff in the report that you may have an interest in, and we will, you'll see that when you read your report. And now I'm going to pop down to page, let's see. I guess it's page maybe 10 of the packet. And one of the things that did pass this session was an affordable housing tax credit that rides alongside the federal low-income housing tax credit. That bill has been in our General Assembly for about 4 years now. It hasn't passed. It will provide additional incentive for developers to create affordable housing. It's something that we have weighed in support of every year. But it was interesting that in the State Line newsletter, there was an article during our General Assembly about this state tax credit and how other states have adopted it. I think we're the 23rd or 24th at this point to adopt it. So it was just interesting that the very issue that we've had so much trouble passing was highlighted in a very timely way by one of the State Line is one of the national newsletters on state policy. Okay, so now we're going to pop down for a little bit of a federal update, and this is page 16. So in addition to the state legislative actions that just took place, we have also just recently, within the last week or so, last 2 weeks, the federal government did pass omnibus spending legislation, which basically put in place the fiscal year budget for the states, for the federal government for federal fiscal year 22. So it's what, almost 6 months late, 5 months late. And the original proposals for this budget, both the president's budgets, the House budget, et cetera, were very, very promising related to the Older Americans Act. And in fact, we were advocating, or nationally was being advocated, we just need to pass the budget at these levels because a continuing resolution isn't going to help us. The continuing resolutions kept funding at the same level. Well, they did pass the budget, but Older Americans Act it basically had a very disappointing outcome. It was increased in various places. I don't believe there were any decreases anywhere, but at much significantly lower levels than were originally proposed or that we were all hoping for. So there are areas in which our state will see increases coming in. It's not going to be a huge cash cow. I don't know, based on the formula distributions once they come out, I don't know that it will have a substantial impact in Indiana. Sure, we'll take all the money we can get, but this document or this document and the next one is the update from US Aging, and it shows you the comparisons between what happened, what our current budget is, what the proposals were, and what came out in the end. So that is what has happened at the federal level. There is the other thing that we were working on nationally was the Build Back Better plan, which not only would have provided support for the home care workforce, but it also had a provision in it that would eliminate the match requirement on the ARPA funding. And our state is one of those that will not release the Older Americans Act ARPA funding. We haven't seen it. And because of that match requirement. So that bill is dead. And what they are working on now is a smaller package, primarily focused on addressing the higher costs that consumers are experiencing, inflation, et cetera. And national advocates are going to continue to move forward and try to get that, all those good proposals that were in Build Back Better related to the issues we care about. They're going to be working on getting those into the stimulus package. Who knows, it could even include that match waiver, but we'll just have to keep an eye on it. If you are talking with your federal legislators in the next couple weeks, it's really important that you talk about the need for this economic stimulus package. We're not allowed to call it Build Back Better anymore. It's something completely new. The conventional wisdom is that this will happen before May. And if it doesn't happen before May, it's probably not going to happen because everybody will be campaigning for their midterms. So I just wanted to keep you posted on that. It is expected to go through the reconciliation process, and which gets it through the Senate. And so that's where we're at federally. Kind of disappointing news. Further down in the packet, starting page 20, there are actions that the White House and the executive administration are taking related to both to COVID-19 and to nursing facilities. They're putting out a big effort related to nursing facility quality. So your packet includes information about that, the next several articles. And then when we move down to page 34, the federal government has also put out a toolkit related to fighting against health misinformation. There are a couple infographics in your package related to that. There's a larger toolkit related to it. And I know that there's all kinds of money out there now related to vaccine messaging and COVID-19 messaging that is just now being implemented from the CDC grants, from the ADRC money that came in related to COVID-19. And so these toolkits may be useful. New poverty guidelines were published, and there's some stuff in there about grand families and kinship care. I think I want to hop down to the last pages of the packet, which are like pages 79, 80, 81, and point out that AARP is accepting feedback on their scorecard. We've talked about the AARP Long-Term Services and Support Scorecard for a long time. And in fact, FSSA has used our scorecard results as one of the drivers of the messaging around the need to move to MLTSS. And AARP is really trying to hear from everybody about ways they can improve the scorecard, what we should be measuring, how we should be measuring it. Some of the criticisms of the scorecard are that they're not measuring necessarily the right things. A lot of the stuff doesn't fall into things that state long-term care systems can control. And the other piece of it is that the way states send in data is kind of apples to oranges sometimes. So they want to strengthen the underlying measuring, the underlying measurements to better align those with what constitutes a quality long-term services and support system, as well as kind of dig into some of the data collection. So there's a blog post that they published, and if you have thoughts on that, you're certainly able and willing to reach out, find that online, and submit your comments to either AARP National, or I'm sure that our AARP staff at the state level would be happy to engage with you on that discussion as well. Okay, so that's everything in the packet. I'm going to stop for any questions that you may have related to any things I've talked about so far. Okay, and so Joanne, you asked me to share a little bit about the AAA's perfect world for MLTSS. We'll put it that way. And it really is the same as the perfect world we shared with you, I think, back in January. I think we, in December or in the last 2 times that we've talked with you, we shared a description of some of our concerns related to MLTSS, as well as some of the ways we thought inclusion of the area agencies on aging as being embedded in MLTSS could help alleviate several of those concerns. Most of them related to the consumer experience. We have actually had the opportunity to present to the FSSA team on what we have dubbed the front end and the back end. The front end being all that initial inquiry and assessment and initial movement of a consumer towards MLTSS eligibility. And then the back end, once they've selected a plan, been enrolled, what happens with their care management on the back end. With the care management on the back end, we have proposed required participation of community-based organizations and area agencies on aging as mandated service coordinators. Basically the role we're doing now for waiver clients. And we, the area agencies on aging have been fortunate to engage in lots of conversation with multiple managed care entities about that role, kind of as a different line of focus. There's a lot of promising language coming out of the managed care entities about their desire to work with the area agency on aging network in that care management role. In addition, we've talked about the front end, and we had the opportunity to share what and provide education to FSSA about the important impact of options counseling and how we work with consumers in getting them the assistance they need, whether that be through Medicaid or other funding sources or no funding sources at all, and just problem solving with the resources the consumer has available. We get involved in so many different situations on a day-to-day basis. And we want to ensure, we think it is a very impactful service, and we want to ensure that folks continue to receive that service regardless of their funding eligibility. And we're also hoping to connect more individuals, particularly those who are only Medicare Advantage involved right now, and maybe Medicaid eligible but not on waiver, connect more of those individuals with our options counseling and the ADRCs. And so we were able to present that information last week in a presentation format, and then several weeks prior in a written format. So we've been advocating for those roles, and kind of in the next several weeks, I guess we're going to start seeing what the decisions FSSA has made regarding their program design. They have scheduled a series of meetings with their stakeholder group, their broad stakeholder group, in which they're going to be rolling out program design components in terms of what they're proposing, would be kind of the details on what they're proposing. There will also be some sort of updated timeline shared. So we're not quite sure if they're still on the timeline of RFP release in May and still awarding making contract awards, I guess now by January 31st of next year. But originally it had been proposed by the end of December. So we'll see if any of that has been pushed back. I don't know if that helps at all. But I will say we've been very consistent in terms of our discussion about what we think is an important role the AAAs can play. We've also had a lot of support from the Division of Aging in helping to articulate for a broader audience in FSSA what we think those roles could be, maybe packaged in a little bit different format in the front end or the back end, but kind of keeping that consistent through line with what we're currently offering.
We want to open this up. Thank you so much for giving us both an update on legislative policies as well as your involvement with administrative policies that are being developed here through FSSA related to managed long-term services and supports. There's lots of questions out there about what's going on and what the status of everything is. So let's open it up and please ask your questions as you may have them. Or comments. Wow, that's really a thorough update, Kristen. If we've got silence on the other side. Hello, everybody. Anyone comments? Because I know people are wondering what the status of development of managed long-term services and supports is in Indiana. Any questions? This is your time to ask. We have people here who can respond to them.
I guess the biggest summary is that it's moving forward. It's kind of on time. And we're just going to be finding out literally in the end of March through April where FSSA has landed. So it's kind of all a big reveal that's going to be happening over the next month and a half or so.
Well, people are saying thank you in the chat box to an update. You refer to sausage making. I think that was your term, or somebody made that term when it's in the legislative process. And we're kind of there now in the administrative policy process, it sounds like, over the next couple of months here in Indiana. Okay, well, thank you so much, Kristen. Really, really appreciate your update. Okay, moving on. We have the committee reports right now, the advisory committee reports. On the Living Longer, Living Better collaborative initiative, I gave a couple of presentations on our Living Longer, Living Better guide in the last few weeks. One was to the Senior Center Coalition of Indiana, and I'm sure Dan will comment on that and how senior centers are utilizing the Living Longer, Living Better guide that the commission has endorsed. And also last week, and the quality conference will be in the next month, I gave a presentation that's been recorded, and I will be part of a panel for the CMS Quality Conference. And the commission's Living Longer, Living Better guide is being used as a model across the country now to encourage the local community care coalitions to develop and implement age and dementia-friendly initiatives in local communities. So there you go, Indiana. We do things once in a while that get some attention. That is good. So there you go. Thank you, everyone that's worked on this, but it's a real pleasure to be able to present that. And I indicated that we had wide support throughout Indiana from about 14 organizations that vetted that guide. So thank you so much, everyone. Judith, do you have a report from the Shared Decision-Making Advisory Committee?
First of all, congratulations on getting that out like that. That's huge. Indiana is doing quite a few things better. So congratulations on that. We've talked to some people. I've talked to people individually, but we've not had any group meetings lately. Everybody who's made ideas are working on their ideas and working forward. So we will have a meeting soon, and those individual ideas we'll bring to the group.
Okay, Judith, thank you. Anyone comments, questions to Judith? Okay, Dan, want to give us an update on the Senior Center Coalition of Indiana?
Yeah, thank you. As Dr. Burke mentioned, on March 4th, we had a Senior Center Coalition conference that had about 40 different leaders from around the state who came together to talk about senior centers. We called it Changing the Game, Preparing for a New Era in Long-Term Services and Support. A lot of it was just getting information out to senior center leaders about MLTSS and some of the things that were happening at the state level. We met at the Hendricks County Senior Services in Danville, and it was a very productive day. Actually, Kristen Lais with Indiana Association of Area Agencies on Aging, who we just heard from, was our first speaker, and she gave a legislative review. And it included a lot of key information about ways that nonprofit organizations can have an impact on state legislation. And it's not always something that is part of our day-to-day. So that was really helpful information. We had a lot of great comments, Kristen, about that. So thank you for presenting. Her presentation is available on our website. And I will go ahead and I just posted the link to the Senior Center Coalition website. It's actually right now housed at the Millrace Center website under the Pittman Institute tab. But all of the information is there in Kristen's presentation, as well as Dr. Burke's presentation. Were both recorded, and they're both available. Again, with long-term services and supports being such a big topic, living longer, living better really gives people kind of a handle on how to create coalitions at the local level, and also leverage some of the work that's already being done without having to necessarily create something from scratch. A lot of times it's just presenting information about what's happening in the world of senior services to some of the local coalitions that already exist, and piggybacking on that. So Dr. Burke gave a great presentation about that. And then we followed it up with a panel discussion. I facilitated a panel that included Janice Holliday from Marshall County and Kara Kellerman from Tipton County, both of whom are involved in some local coalition building. And so we shared that information with the leaders who were there. And overall, it was exciting for us to finally get this off the ground. We had originally planned on the conference being in March of 2020. We all know how that month ended up, and it basically put us on hold for 2 years because of COVID. And so it was exciting for us to finally be able to get our first conference off the ground. And a big thank you to Kristen and Dr. Burke for being part of that and sharing information. Upcoming, we have a brown bag session that is for senior center leaders and key staff at senior centers. And so those are done via Zoom. They're usually the last Friday of the month. And again, there's a link that I just posted that will have some information about that, how folks can join our next brown bag session. The topic is going to be, we call it board games. And it's basically how to develop relations with board of directors and to share some information. It's an opportunity for senior center leaders to network and to kind of present information about how best to work with their boards of directors. And we had some other brown bag sessions in the past that covered similar topics, and they were well attended and well received. So if that's a topic that you're interested in, please share the information. If you know senior center leaders, if you're involved with the local AAA and you work with the senior center, please direct them, share the link with them so that folks can get signed up for that brown bag session. And then also in the planning stages right now, we are looking to do a boot camp for new senior center leaders, and that will cover a lot of different information. More information on that will be coming up, and we'll post that on the website as well. So if anybody has questions about those things, I would direct you to the website. Be happy to answer any questions. But there's really a lot of exciting things happening, and as we're coming out of the pandemic, it's been a really, it's been a stressful time, obviously, for everyone, but especially so for senior center leaders who are trying to do, any kind of social programming and activities at a time when folks were at risk. And so it's exciting for us. We're beginning to see our numbers come back. We were providing services for most of the pandemic, and we were open from June on. in 2020. So we've been open for a good long time. Many senior centers have been open and others are closed or have just recently reopened. So our approach has been a little bit different depending on where you live in the state, but we're starting to see folks coming back now and we're excited about that.
Comments or questions for Dan? Well, Dan, thank you very much. You certainly been very involved in the work of getting the Senior Center Coalition in Indiana active, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to share the Commission's guide with the Senior Center. So thank you very much. Well, I am going to echo what Kristen said, and for our May meeting, I hope I'm not the only one sitting up here at the front of the room where the commission members are. When I was at the Senior Center Coalition meeting, people were saying, well, we're opening our senior centers and people are trickling back. So I hope next time some of you will be willing to come here to Indianapolis and get together. And I think our informal discussions are very important too here, and that's a little harder to have when we have virtual meetings. So it's always good to eat lunch with people sometimes here after a meeting and chat and so forth. But I suspect with hybrid meetings, we're going to have people who went, and I think hybrid meetings do give us an opportunity for people who can't get here to come. But I want to just give a good shout out. Please try to come back in person here for our May meeting and kind of get back and going again. So anyway, anything else anyone have before we come to a close here today with our commission meeting? If not, go enjoy this beautiful day. I understand tomorrow it will be rainy, but anyway, spring is coming and it's a beautiful day today here in Indiana. So happy St. Patrick's Day, and we will meet again in May. Thanks, everyone. We will conclude the meeting today.